I love our happily ever after. Hey fellas, welcome to part 2 of Meng's Komet build. In this exciting episode, I get it all put together. I don't go real in-depth as normal because I try to combine these and make the videos not drag on forever. So I do show you, as Doug DeMuro would say, if you never watched his channel, it's pretty cool. It's that car channel. He's got like 200 billion subscribers. But as he would say, some of the quirks and features of this kit. So, without any further ado, let's get on with the video. All right, fellas, let's take a look at what I've got going on. So I've been working on this rocket motor, or rocket engine. We'll call it motor. So I've been working on this, and it's really delicate. Not the easiest thing to put together, which is why I didn't film it, because I did a lot of test fitting and trial and error. So I've got it together. There's this little, somewhat of a box that goes around the entire, all this detail here on the inside, and some real finicky parts that get glued to this back piece here. Now you can see this moves, and I want that because this part is going to be mated up to, we can get this, see if I can somewhat try to fill you in on what's going on. And this isn't going to be real easy to do, but this back piece gets mated up right along here. So I want it to be able to move somewhat. So I'm not going to try to I could put, like, I could shim that up inside there and tighten it up the way I normally like stuff, but I really want to have it movable so I can get it to make some adjustments when I go to install this. Now, this piece gets glued into the back of the cockpit, just like so. And you're supposed to put it in thusly. Now, there's a lot of parts here that have to come together, and it's going to be hard for me to demonstrate this on video. I thought maybe I could install the cockpit and then install this afterwards, because since I am going to have this apart, I'm going to be painting this, and I'm going to have to mask up all this delicate area. So I thought, well, maybe I can just install it. Well, that's not going to work because this is wider up at the front, bigger in diameter up the front. It won't just slide in. Plus, there's some other stuff that needs to go on. So I'm going to have to paint this and install it before I close up the front half of the fuselage. So then I'm going to have to mask a bunch of this stuff. Which is going to be pretty, I don't know. We're going to tackle that when we get there. See how that all works out. But let's take a look at all this wiring. And you can see I've added some copper wire and some lead wire. Now, the kit does supply you with plastic wiring. And if you take a look at this, it's been my experience that this stuff is, I mean, it's real thin. It's just going to break, especially if I have to mask up and paint around it. It's not going to work. So what I've opted to do is use my lead wire for some of the wiring in this area right here, inside of all this components inside the motor. And I got this from Bass Pro Shops, and it's just different diameter of lead wire. And if you've never used lead wire before, it's a must-have for adding wiring and stuff. I really like it. It's very pliable. As you can see, you can easily bend it. It can break too, so I mean, it's nothing. I could probably pull it apart if I had to. Yep, see, I just pulled it apart. But it is really pliable, and it does have its uses. However, for these longer ones out here, I opted to use copper wire. Now, I just got this at Walmart, and I've got a couple different diameters. It's in the jewelry making section. And so instead of using the plastic ones, I've used the copper ones. Now, this is really, it's pretty stiff. You can still bend it and move it around, but it's going to hold its shape a lot better than the lead wiring, which is what I need. And but it's not going to break. You're not going to pull this apart. You're not going to break it unless you use like these wire snips that I've got here. And I wouldn't recommend using your sprue cutters to cut this stuff, because it will break your sprue cutters. It's not meant for that. So if you're going to be using heavier stuff than lead wire, I would recommend getting some side cut pliers like this. So you can just snip it off. And then I've also, I think I got these at Walmart as well. These are like plastic grippers, whatever you want to call them, plastic pliers. And I use this to make my bends with my wiring. And then you can shape it up. So that's basically what I've done there. So basically just replacing the brittle plastic pieces that are going to break on me with these copper wires. And this is a little bit thicker in diameter, and based off reference pictures, I think this is going to be a little bit more accurate. I also added the little photo etch pieces around this section, these sections here on both sides of the end of the rocket motor. And I'm going to try to take some real skinny diameter lead wire and set it inside there, because when you look at pictures, you can see that there's a bunch of wiring and piping and stuff that goes on the inside of these little sections here. So that's enough of that. I'm going to work on that a little bit later. I'm going to just kind of set this aside for a minute. All right, fellas, the forward half of the fuselage is almost ready to close up. Well, let's take a look at this back half section. And this was pretty simple to put together. You just got your two halves and then a one-piece rudder right here, which I glued into place. Now, they leave it so you can move it back and forth, but there's no need for that. So I just went ahead and glued it in place. Now, after I filled in everything with my seam filler, it looks pretty good. No ghost seams yet, but I may get some. We'll fix them. But I did use the photo etch set to add this exterior detail. There's these pieces right along here with the holes cover up this big opening here. So with these on, you're not going to be able to close it up. If you decide to use the exterior photo etch set, you're not going to be able to put them together like the kit would have you do, where you can put them together and then pull them apart. So if you do opt for this photo etch set, just keep in mind it's probably going to have to remain open. One other thing that they give you is, get the light down here, this piece inside. It's a circular piece that adds a little bit more depth and detail back in that hole. I also used some plastic card back in there, and you probably won't be able to see it, just to cover up some of the, there's kind of an opening down there where you can see where it joins back in here where the rear landing gear would be. So I just cut a triangular piece that fits in there and cemented it in. And of course I painted and weathered it just like I did the cockpit. And I think that turned out pretty good. Now I'm not gonna have to mask this off, because when I paint it, I'm just gonna spray it at an angle, away from here. I'm not gonna be coming in this direction when I paint it. So I don't think I'm gonna have to mask this off. This should be good to go. I've also went ahead and glued the rocket motor section onto the back of the cockpit, and I also glued the ammo bay right here. I've glued that in, and you can see I've painted and weathered it as well. Now I did do a lot of test fitting, and I had to shave off. You can see right here with a file, I've had to file down the edges of here. I also had to come in here and do some cutting away some material, especially right along here, so everything would fit into the forward half of the fuselage, because it is a rather tight fit. On this section, I've added this piece here, which gets glued in, and then also I glued the front skid plate extension in right here, and just glued in one side of it. And then I put the halves together and made sure that they were where they were supposed to be. That way I'm not going to have to try to put in all these parts and not have them glued yet. So let's see if we can get this in here. Now, like I said, this is a snug fit. And I'm not actually going to glue the cockpit to the sidewalls. Everything fits in here tightly without having to glue it. Okay. So there we go. So I did have an issue right along the top here. If you put this kit together, just keep in mind, you're just gonna have to do a lot of test fitting. And I've got it really snug. It's gonna be a real close fit. I'm gonna have to do some seam filling right here on top and right here on the bottom. But then all the other components, like this piece here, will go along the back. And I can glue this in after I glue these pieces together. As you can see, there's not much of this rocket motor that you're going to be able to see. The only thing you're really going to be able to see is this stuff out here. So I've got it primed, but I'm not going to actually paint it yet. What I plan on doing is it's going to be a lot easier to mask off, to paint the fuselage, mask this area off, and then paint the rest of the rocket motor after I get the rest of the fuselage painted, rather than trying to mask all this stuff off. So I've got some pieces of tape here, and I'm just going to squeeze this stuff together in a few of these places, and I'm going to try to go slowly, but I am going to have to hold my breath. See, that's really tight right there. So let's put a piece of tape right here, and I don't know, that may not really do much to hold it, but I'm going to go ahead and start my gluing right here. Let's get this hammered down first. So I'm going to use the Tamiya extra thin quick setting. I really like this stuff. I prefer it a lot more than regular Tamiya extra thin. Now when I squeeze these together, I'm not going to like overly squeeze, because I want to keep the shape, this circular shape, because if you press too hard, especially if you use regular Tamiya extra thin, what I found tends to happen is you distort the circular shape, and then you're going to have a step when you go to put the nose on it. So I like to squeeze it nice and hard, but not so much that I squeeze out a bunch of plastic and distort the shape. And then I'll come along the top here, and I'll have to figure out how I'm going to handle this seam line, because it is probably going to be visible, and it's not a thing that I can really get in there and sand real well, so because of this raised detail. So I'll figure that out. But I'm going to go ahead and hold this. I'll get this upper part glued, and then I'm going to come down here along the bottom and glue the other side of this and hold it, and just kind of work my way back. And then I can end up gluing the back piece and then putting all my other stuff in. Now I've got these other doors that are going to be left open, and you can see I've added the photo etch and weathered these, and this one as well. But then there's this third one here that goes in the middle that's not going to be open. This is going to be glued down, so I can go ahead and glue that into place once I get everything straightened up and lined up. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this glued, and I'll see you in a minute. All right, fellas, I've got the fuselage halves together, and I've got the seams all taken care of with CA glue and metallic pigment. Just a lot of fine sanding, but I think I've got everything taken care of. We'll know once we get primer on it. So I'm ready to go. This is one of those kits, it's not for the beginner, definitely not for the beginner, because there's a lot of stuff you need to paint and put together, and then you're gonna have to mask, and just there's a lot to this kit. And it's not your typical do the cockpit, paint the cockpit, put it in there, and then build the rest of the plane and then paint it. This is a lot of put together, paint, strategically put together, strategically paint. You're gonna have to do some masking, so it is definitely a different kit in that respect. So as you can see, I've got some AK extreme metal aluminum on the sides here. Now this is going to be partially visible. There is some photo etch parts I could have used, but to be honest with you, it's not going to be that noticeable, and they're not much different, especially this part right here. Now there is another piece that goes along the bottom here that it's a lot different than what they have molded in on the kit part. And there's also a piece that goes back here, but I found once I put the wings on, the gun covers up a lot of that detail, like so. And so you're not really going to be able to see a lot of it. And the only opening you're going to be able to look through is obviously this one with the gun bay, and then my gun's going to be in here covering a lot of that up. However, I do want to do a little bit more weathering. I'm just going to leave this a metallic finish. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the finish was on the inside, but just to make it look, give it a little bit of variation and a little bit more interesting, I'm going to leave it this metallic finish on the inside and on the inside of the wing. Now the guns I painted with my Mr. Surfacer 1500 black, and then I just took some gunmetal pigment and went over it with the gunmetal pigment. That's how I typically do these guns, and it gives it kind of a neat look to it. What I'm gonna do though is I'm gonna use a technique that I kind of learned from Will Pattison. Now mine isn't quite as in depth. His is probably he does a lot more thorough experimentation on stuff like this. But I found that this works for me, and I don't have to mix a bunch of stuff. It's just simple, and I find that it works okay. So what I just poured into my palette is some Pledge Floor Care, otherwise known as Future. And then I've got some Bombay inks. Now these are India inks. I like to use these a lot, especially for this method. Now I think you can use regular acrylic paint for this, because this Future is acrylic paint. But I prefer inks. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a wash, and Will and some other people call this a magic wash. Now again, if you really want to get in depth and see somebody do it that knows how to do it and probably gets a better result than what I'm gonna get, check out, he's got some videos on it, and I think Doogs Models has some videos maybe on it. But I find that I can get by with this. So I just mix my Future, and then I'll take a little bit of India ink. I'm mixing some brown because I just don't want a straight black, and it doesn't take much. And I'm gonna mix in a little bit more black maybe. So I'm just dipping my brush in there, and that might be too much. If you get too much in there, you can always add a little bit more Future or Floor Care, whatever you want to call it. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I've got my magic wash. Now this is something that I don't take off, and it is gonna be shiny. So if you want it to not be shiny, then you'll have to spray it with a dull finish afterwards. Or I think Will Pattison had used instead of the Future, a carrier that was actually a matte carrier. So I think I'm going to want a little bit more black, because I do want this to stand out a little bit more. So let's just add a little bit more black ink. See how this works. Now, this does take a little bit of experimentation, so if you get too much on here, it tends to pool up a lot. And if you're not looking for that kind of look, then you know, you just have to experiment with it. So I'm just gonna brush this on like I normally would with a wash, and I may have to go over this again, and I may end up using some more black, but we'll see. We'll see what this looks like. You can't always tell what it's gonna look like when it's on wet. Now I do have a lot on here, so just like this. Okay, just like so. So now I'm going to set this aside and let that dry a little bit. I can also hit it with a hair dryer on low, so I don't spread it all out, just to speed up the drying process. And I'm also going to come in here and do the same thing on this with the magic wash, just to dirty and grime it up. Give it a little bit more dirt and grime than just normal straight aluminum. Okay, so that's basically how that works. Now we'll let this dry, and then we'll come back and take a look at it. Alrighty, fellas. I've expended a lot of brain power getting it to this point. So as you can see, I've got it all primed. For my primer, I like to use Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 Black, thinned with Mr. Color Leveling Thinner. So I shot my first coat on there. I did some wet sanding with 3000 grit sandpaper, and then came back with a highly diluted 1500 Black, and then sprayed it again, so I've got a nice smooth finish. Now, I've got a lot of this stuff masked off using poster putty. Now you can see up here, this doesn't fit right. It's because I have the photo etch parts on there, but I've also got poster putty on inside of there holding this down to basically mask off that ammo bay that I had already painted. So this is going to get painted the rest of the fuselage color. So I'm just using that as to mask off that area, and it's going to get painted. Now the other piece, I'm going to have to paint this anyway. So I just left the other piece off to paint separately, but I do have some styrene tubing with some poster putty in it to mask off the rocket motor stuff that I already have painted inside there. Okay, these gun bay doors, I don't want to lift these up. Now this is the plastic kit gun bay doors, but I'm not going to use those. The only reason I have these on there is I've got them on there to mask off that area so I don't get sprayed paint down in there. Now the photo etch kit comes with these sets of doors, and you can see that they're real thin. Obviously they're photo etch, but I've bent them the way they're supposed to be bent, and I'm just going to use these because we are having the gun bay doors open, and then when the owner gets it, he can just set them up here like this, like they've been removed for maintenance or whatever. So going with the photo etch gun bay doors on this one. Now there is going to be some photo etch latches that I'm going to add, and I debated on whether or not to put them in now. There's 4 on each one of these. There's going to be 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here, and they're real finicky. But I figured I'll probably just be best to go ahead and put those on afterwards and paint them afterwards. Otherwise, I'm going to knock them off and lose them during the painting process and whatever weathering I'm going to do. The what else? I think that's about it. I'm going to go ahead, and the next episode we'll go in depth on painting this, because what I want to do, and I understand some people say that these probably didn't see a lot of use, so they're not going to get real weathered, but that would be boring to me. So I'm going to do some weathering. I'm not going to totally, dog this out and make it look like it went through hell, but I do want to add some chipping on the wing, and from what I understand, the wings were made of wood. So it's going to be kind of interesting to show some of that wood peeking through in different spots like it gotten worn off. And then some aluminum right along here, I think would be a cool look if it's kind of worn right around here on the gun bay openings and stuff like that. So I think that would just add to make it a little bit more interesting and eye appealing. So I will catch you on the next episode, and we'll get to painting. Thanks for watching, fellas.